Hi there, my name is Mary Lovelace, and I am presenting my lightning talk on the question, how do librarians promote cultural awareness? I'd like to first apologize that I'm not able to give this in person. My son became sick and he has croup and a double ear infection. But we got him some meds and he's on the mend, so all is well now. Um, Now, cultural awareness within education is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I have spent a lot of time in my career as an educator working closely with different cultures, specifically with emergent bilinguals. My current position right now is an English 2 teacher to emergent bilinguals, and specifically with students who have been in the United States for 3 years or less. So it's been a really unique opportunity, and I've absolutely loved it. And it's really opened my eyes to how I can become more culturally aware, especially when I become a librarian. So, first off, let's talk about what is cultural awareness. It's one of those terms that we may hear a lot, but everyone might have a little different definition for it. So, I wanted to share my definition of the term is basically being aware of your personal culture as well as surrounding cultures. So, not only knowing where you come from, what your background is, but also knowing about the surrounding culture. Specifically, we're talking about what may be on your campus. So, what culture do your students have? What demographics? What are their backgrounds? Where do they come from? What kind of culture did they grow up with? Is not only recognizing or being aware, but also learning to appreciate the similarities and respecting the differences between different cultures. So, seeing how are we the same, where what are some differences between us, and not making anyone else feel like an other, but being accepting and welcoming, and also acknowledging and recognizing that diversity, making students feel seen and heard. Now, I found this article from the Houston Chronicle from this past September that I thought was really fascinating. The article itself was about the disparity between teacher cultures and demographics and student demographics. And so I took this pie chart from one of the graphics that they had in the Houston Chronicle. And this shows that here in Texas, these are the demographics of students enrolled during the 2021 to 2022 school year. So if you look, 53% of students enrolled in Texas at this or last school year was 53%. That is a huge percentage. It's not surprising to me because I work almost exclusively with a Hispanic population, but that could be pretty surprising to some people. I think this really shows, as you can see, that there's not a majority white population here in Texas as far as the schools go. And so I think it's really important to point out that, we're very diverse and we need to make sure that our school cultures are reflecting that. Now, if you go ahead and look at our next pie graph, you can see that this is the demographic of full-time and substitute teachers employed during the 2021-2022 school year. And you can see that the majority of teachers, whether they be full-time teachers or substitute teachers in Texas last school year, the majority, 56% white. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We can't really control what our skin color is, but there's a huge disparity between where our students are at and having the staff on campuses reflect their own cultures. Now, there's not really much that we can do about that. As librarians, we're not the ones in charge of hiring teachers. That's more of an admin thing. I did find this quote really fascinating. It says, research shows that teacher and administrator diversity benefits all students, particularly students of color, and many advocates say educators should more closely reflect the cultural and racial demographics of students. So this has been something that has been difficult for me as a teacher, especially considering that I teach emergent bilingual students. I'm obviously a white teacher, and it has been a struggle for me because I'm like, you know what? I don't come from the same culture as these students. How am I going to be able to relate to them? And as a librarian, my culture is not going to reflect the majority of my students on campus. And so, what can I do to be more culturally aware and have that safe, comfortable background that these students need while they're on campus? Well, I, I've come to the conclusion that students need three main things. Students need to be seen, they need to be heard, and they need to belong. What I mean by that is that students shouldn't be seen as just a demographic. They should be seen as a full individual, seen with their background, with their culture. Their voices need to be heard. We need to be able to take time and listen to what they're saying. And they need a sense of belonging on their campus. They need to know that this is a safe place for them where they belong and their culture belongs. So, again, what can we do as librarians to ensure that they have this environment? Well, one thing is that I found this really good article, and it had 5 tools to build effective intercultural communication. And there were some things in there that I had never really thought of before, of how to build that communication with students in order to help them have that community. I really like this quote. It said, "These tools help a librarian more readily respond to the needs of the community by understanding the community's culture in terms of the beliefs people hold about the world, the values they share about living in the community, and the way they treat one another. With this awareness, the librarian can adjust for cultural differences that might influence the collection, management, and provision of information." So, really, we want to make sure that not only do our students feel like they belong in person, but we want to make sure that our collection in the library, our information, everything that we're managing also reflects the cultures of our students. So the 5 tools that this article provided was, first, identify cultural dimension. And what they meant by this was basically examining the different cultures, looking at the breakdown of the demographics on your campus and really thinking about what defines these cultures, what are cultural norms for them, what is accepted to them, what is not accepted, and really understanding where these students may come from. Our second tool is identifying cultural style communication. All different cultures react and communicate in different ways. And, here in the United States, we may be used to one way to communicate with one another, but we might have a student from a completely different culture where our norms here are completely different from where they are from. So we have to be aware of those different communication styles. Our third tool is recognize who and what might be marginalized. We know that even though the majority of our students that are enrolled right now come from minority backgrounds, they're still marginalized in a lot of different areas, especially in Texas too. And so as a librarian, we have to be cognizant of how we can help these students overcome these marginalizations. Our fourth tool, recognize mechanisms for organizing and supplying information, thinking about not only how do we have materials organized and according to our norms, but what might be best for our students when it comes to organizing materials and supplying that information out to them. What is the best way to communicate? And again, tying back to that intercultural communication. And then our fifth tool is recognizing who built the information technology, really evaluating how our information science is put together and evaluating how we can make our technology the most accessible to our students. Another really fascinating article I found talked about how how we should have racially diverse multicultural literature in our school libraries. I really like this quote. It said, "School libraries have a role to play in promoting multicultural literature to all students, especially as inclusion of more diverse and contemporary texts have lagged in the high school English curriculum." As a high school English teacher currently, this is a huge struggle. I'm very blessed to have a district supplied classroom library, but not all campuses have that. I have worked at high schools that did not allow that, and so it can be difficult having materials that reflect our students' cultures. And this is where teachers and school librarians can really collaborate with one another. The article talked about how librarians can collaborate with the English department and figure out basically what multicultural literature is already available in the to students within their classroom libraries, because oftentimes classroom libraries may seem a little bit more accessible to students versus the school library. Because I know on my campus, we're not always allowed to send students to the library, so they really rely on our classroom libraries. And so this is one way the school librarian can really help with teachers and their collections. And not only that, but it ties back to, again, identifying the different cultures that are present on campus and seeking to add literature to collection. I think there's a common misconception in Texas that the majority of Hispanics in our student population are all Mexican. And while there are a lot of Mexicans in our culture, I will say that the majority of my students are not Mexican. I only have a small handful. The majority of my students are actually from Venezuela, and I have students from Colombia, Honduras, Ecuador, Cuba, um, just tons and tons of different countries from Central and South America. And I think that, we can benefit more. I know I've benefited a lot as an educator learning about all these different cultural backgrounds and finding literature in my classroom that reflects their cultures. And I think that that's ultimately something that would really add more value to the library. Now, lastly, the last article that I found really talked about analyzing your diverse literature. I found this quote that said, "School librarians can take steps to improve the diversity in their current book collection. In order to create a diverse collection, a school librarian must first understand what is missing from the current collection. This can be done by completing a collection analysis over the school library catalog." Excuse me. So basically, we need to be evaluating our school collections, not just thinking about all the different cultures, but really diving in and saying, hey, do we actually have the books that reflect the diversity on our campus? These are a few questions that I try to ask myself. Again, first, are collection analyses performed on a regular basis? Is this something that is just done once a year at the end of the year and then you're done with it? Or as a librarian, are you constantly evaluating, seeing, okay, this is our collection. How can I improve to make this more welcoming to other students? Second, does your collection reflect the cultures of the student population on your campus? I know I've said this a lot, but students, again, need to be seen and heard and feel that they belong. And if they don't see things in the collection that reflect their culture, they're not going to want to go to the library. They're not going to want to read those books. They want to read things that are familiar to them. They want to see things that reflect who they are. And if there aren't any books available that reflect their culture and who they are as a person, they're not going to want to read it. And lastly, this is something that's really important to me as a teacher, thinking about, are there texts available in the different languages spoken by students? On our campus in particular, we have a large population of students who speak Spanish because we have a large Hispanic population. And we also have a lot of students that speak Vietnamese and Arabic as well, because we just have large populations of that. And I have analyzed our library collection, and there's a few Spanish books. There's a few, and I didn't see any books in Vietnamese. I didn't see any books in Arabic. And so I know that this is something that, um, our school can do to improve. And this is something that I think other schools can do to improve as well. Because again, we want our students to belong. We want them to feel like this is their school so they can take that identity along with them. I want to close with my references and just let you know that this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I know that if we are able to do these things, that our library will be able to reflect the cultures of our campus, will have that cultural awareness, and our students will feel more welcome and be more happy on our campuses. Thank you so much.